Today we're talking about a career in the video games industry with special guest and former Roblox employee Spotco to learn about life in the video games industry, how to get a foot in the door, and hopefully some words of wisdom for aspiring developers. As always, my name's BanTech and I'll be your host for this journey, so let's travel beyond the blocks. Hello and welcome back to Beyond The Blox, the podcast all about the Roblox platform and game development. On this episode we're diving into the topic of pursuing a career in the video games industry, working your way up to a job with a AAA studio if that's something you wish to do, and we'll also touch on some of the less positive aspects and why some developers choose to keep programming as just a hobby. To share a perspective from the inside, we've got Spotco here to discuss it with me. So Spotco, who are you and what do you do?
Hey guys, I'm Spotco. You probably know me from being the developer of this game called Robeats. It's this online rhythm game MMO on Roblox. It's been out for a couple of years. Hopefully you try it out. A few other interesting things about me. I used to also work at Roblox. If you really keenly track the developer forums, you might have seen me in the past talk about various features that our team used to work on. And currently, I work at a large AAA game studio that you might have heard of before.
Okay, perfect. So let's dive straight into it and talk about where you came from. So talking about college and what you studied there, did you study a computer science program?
Yeah. So I studied computer science at the University of Washington in Seattle. And I actually did not plan on doing anything like that at all when I first got in. I honestly thought I was going to be like a graphic design person because that's what I was really into in high school. But freshman year, first quarter, I took this CS 101 class. And I'm like, wow, this is actually pretty fun. And the thing that really got me into it was the fact that I could program games. I remember like the first thing that I did was just like this text-based adventure game. So that was really the thing that motivated me to try to get good at programming. The other thing I do remember about just programming in general is that it's like an activity that takes a lot of free time.
Yeah.
I know some people just have a natural aptitude. I actually think it's just like pure amount of free time you can spend banging your head against the wall. That like that's how you get good at programming. And luckily during college I had ample free time.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I remember specifically objects. I had a really tough time understanding those. And like you had to use objects in order to like draw these like GUI things. I don't know if you had your own troubles with all this. So all our classes were in Java. And at some point I learned Flash. Specifically, I did Flash because that was at the time, this was back in like 2011. It was probably the best way to get a game in front of people. The joke that I like to make sometimes is that Steve Jobs killed Flash. And that's actually not too far from the truth. If you go look it up online, there is literally this letter that he wrote saying we need to kill Flash. And soon after that, people stopped playing Flash games. But there's this really good point in time where like people were playing Flash games and you can make a lot of money off Flash games. You ever play any Flash games?
Yeah, so I definitely play Flash games. I think that's probably where playing games on my computer started as a kid. Sort of, they're quite easy to get on. There's loads of free Flash games out there. There's lots of websites that sort of collate them all into kind of some lists. And also, they used to be the only thing that you could get through on the school computers. So we used to play them at school as well.
Yeah, totally.
But I remember learning Flash as well, actually, in my IT class at school as well. And I think that's probably where my first experience of creating a game started. But we didn't really do too much programming. It was just sort of just enough to get by.
Like the Adobe Flash, like it was like that integrated editor. And like, you could edit all the keyframes. Did you do all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it was that sort of stuff. So animating things across the screen. And I think we started with just a simple animation where it wasn't really interactive. It was just sort of watching things go across the screen. And then it turned into, adding a button here and making different things happen. So I can see why you'd start with Flash games. Definitely,
Mm-hmm.
it's an easy way to get in.
Did you ever end up writing any? I remember it's called ActionScript. There's like ActionScript 2 and ActionScript 3.
In fact, now that you're saying it, I remember I completely forgot about all of that, to be fair. But yes, I remember, I think it was version 3 that we were programming in. And yeah, it was just a few little light bits again. But I just wasn't happy with only doing what you could do on the screen with just animating things. I wanted to make it interactive. So I definitely looked into that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the way we were taught it was a little different. So I remember specifically how I got into it was there was this web development class that we did. So basically we had CS 101, 102. They were all in Java and you just do all your normal intro programming stuff. And then we had this third class where you learn, like HTML, JavaScript, PHP, that kind of stuff. And then there were these extra after class sessions that one of the TAs did. And that's where we learned Flash. And the way that they made us do it specifically, I think we used this this Flash compiler. I remember there's some way to like compile it from command line. And basically we didn't even use CS. Like we downloaded like this Flash compiler from the Adobe website and we did all this stuff and somehow output an SWF and somehow everything worked. At least for me, it was almost entirely code based. But then, like as I started doing more Flash games, I worked with some people online. Like shout out to I think Guy Unger from the Netherlands. So I was somewhat involved in the Newgrounds community, and I was doing a collaboration with this guy online. And like all he gave me was this, I think like Adobe CS Flash file. I'm like, I don't know how to work this, man. Give me the code. But anyway, I figured it out because it's not too difficult, but just the way that I guess there was just a lot of ways to set up how your projects worked and all that kind of stuff back in the day.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's really cool actually that you started sort of as a hobby again from the very beginning. Because as you say, I think if you've got the free time to just bang your head against the wall for a while when it doesn't work, and if you don't have really any pressure to do it, you're just doing it because you're interested in it.
Oh yeah,
that's a really good way to learn. And I sort of did something similar, but with Roblox as the thing that I learnt on. And that was probably when I was 14 or maybe even younger. So at school, you just have tons of free time when you're at home. It's crazy how much free time you don't have as you grow up. But I think if you can learn early when you've got that time to spare and when you're really interested in it, definitely helps.
I think that's definitely the best way to learn. I guess one other thing I wanted to say was, I was thinking, one, if I knew about Roblox when I was a kid, I'd totally be into it. Kind of the equivalent. I'm not sure. Do you remember what year DevX became like, it gave you money?
I think it was during, I had a 5-year break, and I think it was during that break, so I came back and it was already here, but I think it must have been 2014, perhaps.
Okay. So there was, I did make a little bit of money in my Flash game career. There's this site, and I was actually looking this up yesterday. It still exists. It was called flashgamelicense.com, and it's actually a very interesting model. Basically, you would sign up as a independent developer. You would upload your game, and that's literally like you'd upload the SWF file of your game. And all these Flash game portals, and there's still a ton of these, all these Flash game portals would bid on your game, and the highest bidder, you would get the money. And for this game, I think for my very first like big game, I made, I think like $700 or something. And, back in college, I'm like, oh yeah, this is awesome. But, and, I was kind of thinking like maybe I could keep doing this. This game took maybe like 6 months to make and I got $700 from it. So I'm like, if I can make more games and faster, like maybe this could be a legit business. But I think not long after that, that's when the Steve Jobs letter, or maybe the Steve Jobs letter already happened. This is like saying, I will never have Flash on the iPad. And then the Flash game market just slowly, I think it's still slowly collapsing, or maybe it's already dead. But anyway, I checked it out yesterday, and this site still exists. It was flashgamelicense.com. That's what it was called. But now if you go to it, it's like, it doesn't even say anything about Flash games. It's literally like selling your mobile games. So that just goes to show how dead the whole Flash thing is. So, I'll pour one out, rip in peace.
No, that's really interesting actually, because I didn't realize that's how it worked. I to be honest just thought that there was no money in making Flash games and that all these websites were just free. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, so at least just a little bit of specifics about it. I don't know if you remember playing games on Newgrounds. There'd be that whenever you played a game, they'd have like the intro with like some web portal. And
Yes.
there's a bunch of these. And I think the way the web portals work is they ran ads. So basically, the web portals bought the games. The games would drive the traffic to the web portals, and then traffic would click the ads or look at the ads. And, that's how the whole cycle worked. But definitely not as lucrative and a lot more competition than an ecosystem like Roblox.
Yeah, definitely. I think Roblox is a good platform, but you just have to, say, find it and start building on there. But yeah, no, that's really interesting. So sort of after college with these Flash games, you then obviously went into doing sort of computer science and programming as a career. So where did that career start from college?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough in university that University of Washington, they had some good connections. Well, first of all, since I was from Seattle, like the big companies that are always hiring there are Amazon and Microsoft. But I was lucky enough that I got an internship at Zynga. I remember just talking to, I think they had an engineer at this career fair, and I was just really nerding out about various Flash things. I forget what I was talking about in particular. I think, long story short, like having these Flash games, that kind of got me my job. So I guess if you're looking for a job out there, if you can have some like cool side project to show, especially one that you made money off, like, I think that'll impress anybody, not just like recruiters, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. And Zynga have quite an interesting business model actually, don't they? Because it's sort of free to play games. What kind of things did you learn from working at Zynga?
Yeah, so I interned there twice. Well, I think first of all, you learn a lot just from an internship. And for me, it was really interesting. That was actually the first time living away from Seattle. So they're in downtown San Francisco. What was interesting is that I went there right after their heyday. So, I think maybe like 2009 or so, the age of like Facebook games, they were really killing it. Like, they had this like really fancy HQ. They had all sorts of free snacks. But then something happened to Facebook games. I'm not a super expert in it, but they were definitely doing less well. And like that was around when I was there. I think they just had layoffs. One of the things I remember is they used to have this thing called an Odwalla, which is like this really fancy, like this is some sort of like juice that you would see at Whole Foods. And the thing everybody, like the people that used to be there when it made a lot of money were telling me is that they used to have free Odwalla, and now they're not doing so well. They had to cut the Odwalla. So
Oh no.
yeah. So it was interesting to see, like, they still had their fancy office, but they couldn't throw all the same parties or any of that kind of stuff anymore. So the mindset was a little bit like, at least for Zynga when I was there, they had these aging Facebook games. You probably know them from like Farmville, like games you would go onto Facebook and play. And they were in the middle of doing a transition. They knew that mobile games were the future. They unfortunately didn't have any mobile games, period. So they were just like, we gotta like try all these different mobile games. They weren't making as many as they could. They were like trying to make they'd call it a few directed bets. I would say I learned a bunch of stuff when I was there. I think I thought about what was the best way to describe it. And I came to this right here. I would say the biggest takeaway that I got about game making when I was there from that internship was what kind of mindset to have when you're making a game. And I would compare it like this. Like when you're making a game on your own and, so like what are the kind of things you think about? At least for me, it was like, let's make the awesomest game ever. It's going to have the coolest story, the coolest art. It's going to be like some other game that I played, but better, or like Call of Duty, but with like anime girls instead.
Yeah.
Right.
Something like that, right? You just you want to make something that you would play that's kind of an improvement from when you're playing other games. You're like, oh, I wish it had this, I wish it had that. You're kind of merging all of that into this super game, this amazing idea.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think when you get professional, or at least when you get professional at Zynga, I'd say it's like the difference between an artist and a craftsman. Like at Zynga, there is like creativity and like bouncing ideas and all that kind of stuff. But what they were really about was, let's get a game with these set of features. They actually had this really funny word called fast follow. So when I was there, we were working on this game called Empires and Allies. So there was first the Facebook version of Empires and Allies, which was a Facebook game. And then I think that got shut down at some point. And then they did a mobile, like, realistic reboot. But the actual game itself was literally just like if you ever played Clash of Clans before?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So almost the exact same gameplay of Clash of Clans, except for it was like realistic and 3D and like modern military. And they had the word for it, fast follow. We were trying to fast follow Clash of Clans because that was something that was proven to work.
Okay, interesting.
In some ways, it's a little easy to get cynical about stuff when you're talking about, like, we're doing fast follows, we want to have feature parity with Clash of Clans. And in some ways, it's also, I think, like, you can become a lot more creative if you have certain constraints. So, the way we talked about it was Clash of Clans, it has these set of features. Like, we want to hit at least these many features before we have the game launch. And then on top of the features that we're going to do, we're going to have like X, Y, and Z differentiating features to differentiate us from Clash of Clans. The most important one being our theme. Clash of Clans was all cartoony, and our game was going to be like, modern warfare, I guess Call of Duty. It wasn't like first person, it was still like top down, but like realistic 3D explosions, soldiers dying everywhere, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was the way they talked about games at Zynga, as opposed to this like wide-eyed, idealistic, we're going to make the awesomest game ever, that kind of thing.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. Do you think that was because they were sort of in this survival mode, or do you think that that's just where they pivoted to and they're still doing that now?
So the other thing is that when you work at games at a large company, like making a game, that is a major investment. Like I was there twice at different internships, and at their peak, they had maybe like 40 people working full time on this game. And, these people are all making a San Francisco engineer salary. So like when you make this game, you're investing probably millions of dollars into it. So when you're doing that, you want to have some type of accountability, or like, you want like proof that this game concept works. So that like, even just from that, you're going to play a little more conservative. Like, let's do what already works. But like, you're going to want some sort of proof that the market is there. If you make this game, you're going to want to make sure that not just like wasting time on like, stuff that matters in the end. So that kind of thing.
So, sort of moving on from Zynga and mobile games, where did you then go from there?
Yeah, so after I graduated from college, I bounced around at various startups in the Bay Area. My personal goal, at least, was still to get into a large game studio. Zynga and all these free-to-play mobile games are cool, but like I want to work on like some real games. And, I'm pretty hardcore. I think that was my mindset back then. And I remember running into like recruiters and them saying, how many years of C++ experience do you have on your resume? And I remember telling them, well, I did do a little bit in university. But I remember that being a thing that companies specifically were looking for.
Okay. So they all want C experience.
Yeah, they want professional C experience. I think one of the interesting things is in university, we did do C assignments, but they were like, small little things. They were like 100 lines of C. Go write printf or something from scratch or something like that. But then when you're out in the real world, this doesn't just apply to C, but it's especially noticeable with C. when you're out in the real world, you're going to be working with this crazy. You're never going to be writing anything from scratch, anything from just, oh, I'll make that new Visual Studio project and just start from scratch. You're going to be working from an existing code base. And I think that's just what they wanted to see specifically. So I was in this mindset where I would, after being at a couple like just random startups in the Bay Area, I was looking for specifically something that would give me C experience. And I remember specifically, I think I found Roblox from some sort of online game listing. I think I sent in my resume. They did a couple rounds of interviews. I went and played Roblox, and that's why I made my account. I remember the first few games I played were Phantom Forces, Pokemon Brick Bronze. I was very impressed, and also had no idea what was going on IP wise when I saw that game. And there was this one game that was like they recreated rides in Disneyland, and you could ride them. I remember you could ride through the entire Tower of Terror in Disneyland. I don't know if you've ever been to LA before.
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
So I tell you the truth, I didn't really know what was going on with Roblox. I was like, do you guys have like contractors at the company making these games, or like how else can you make them so good? So
well, that just the sort of the variety. Even if you just click on 4 or 5 games on the sort of the front page of games, completely different experiences. And some of them you have your avatar, some of them you don't have your avatar, all sorts of different stuff. So I can see how if you didn't know that sort of the creators were the players, then that would be quite interesting, intriguing, I assume.
Well, I don't know. I assume you've had to explain Roblox to like friends or family before. Like, what do you say when you're trying to explain Roblox?
Oh, I don't know. It's sort of a big multiplayer, kind of a sandbox. I don't know. Yeah, it's hard to describe, to be fair. I think you can play all these different games that other people have created. Yeah, it's a difficult one because it doesn't really fit into any specific category. Like, you couldn't put it in an MMORPG kind of category because you're creating the world as well. Yeah, it's an interesting one.
I had to explain it to a friend recently, and man, what did I say? Well, I think the easiest way to do it is you try to explain it in terms of other stuff. So I'm like, do you know about Minecraft private servers? And I think he knew about that, so we were good from there. But other times I've used, like, it's like a combination of Minecraft and Steam, which is that's a little weird. Like, if you didn't know anything about it at all, it'd be on Minecraft and Steam. How are those two things related? But
yeah, Steam-like in that you've got all of these games here that you can play, apart from that most of the games are free to play, whereas they're not with other things like Steam. And then also you've got a common avatar that you play in all of these, and you've got this common currency across all of it. It's an interesting model, and I can see why it works.
Yeah. I guess one interesting thing from the interview experience is I think after you do all your various technical interviews, and this is all standard stuff, this is like they'll get you to a whiteboard and you gotta like write things on a whiteboard. At least back when I was doing it, it would always end with you would go into Builderman's office and you would just talk for, I think like this, like he wouldn't actually ask you coding questions. He'd just talk to you about like what are you interested in and all that kind of stuff. And I do remember talking with him about Flash games. Like, I did a little bit of research about Roblox before going into the office. So I was like, wow, in some ways this is really similar to like my experience with Flash games. It's like, I know Flash games, they definitely had less kids creating it, but the fact that there are all these tools and that anybody could use them and you can use them to make like really cool looking animated stuff. I remember talking about that.
I think it's interesting as well that you got to sort of speak to the CEO of the company as part of your interview, because I think at other companies, or at least very big ones, you probably wouldn't really get to see or speak to the CEO that much. So it's quite interesting that Roblox is still sort of small enough for that to happen.
Yeah, I don't know if they still do it. Hopefully they still do. I remember he was like, this was the thing that like he really wanted to keep doing, just kind of get to know every single new hire.
Yeah, that's nice, and I think it's probably inspiring as well to be able to see them.
Definitely.
So that's good. So I assume that Roblox then didn't require professional C experience for you to get a job there?
Okay, so one interesting thing is all these game companies, like the way they do their first round of interview is pretty similar. So they will give you this packet of questions, and it's almost like a CS, 102 homework assignment. They will ask you, they'll start out with some shorter questions. I remember one question that almost everybody likes to ask is, what is RAII, which is this thing called like resource allocation is initialization. They'll ask you all these C++ trivia questions, and then they'll ask you some of those, and they'll ask you a couple of actual coding questions, and you gotta go like code the C++ program. So they definitely do test your C++ off the bat. But, I think they were just looking to hire just people that knew how to code in general.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So what was your role at Roblox then?
Yeah, so officially I was on the client team. I think I had varied roles, but in the end, it ended up being communicating with developers and figuring out what they wanted. So I did a bunch of stuff. I think the very first thing people might remember that I did was, do you remember when they added the community Sift chat filter?
Yes, I do, yep.
So I was the one that implemented that on the Roblox client side. And this was when I was super new. I had, I didn't know that it was going to be this huge thing. And then hashtags or whatever.
Yeah, tagging the chat.
Tagging.
I think you're going to be quite unpopular revealing that you're the one who implemented that.
Well, it's okay. I just did the part where we hooked it up to the actual game client itself. I absolved myself of anything involving the actual hashtags itself. But I thought it was funny how it basically became like a meme, like a joke. Yeah, so that was one of my very first projects. I had no idea like what kind of effect. Like I thought we were just going to be like, oh, you just hook this up and you just forget about it. And then, when we turned it on, like, everybody started freaking out. And I'm like, holy crap. And I think one of the big things I realized is when we were working on the Roblox client, like you push out a change, you have the power to make a lot of people very unhappy. And also, hopefully, you can make them happy too by shipping good features. But it's tough. It is very tough.
Yeah, I can imagine. Is it sort of instantaneous, like you push it out and that's it, everyone upgrades to the latest version?
Yeah, I think most of the stuff that we were pretty confident that it would work or that like it wouldn't, cause anybody to freak out, you could just turn on instantaneously. Like we had this system called Flags, which is basically every, I think it was Tuesday, they would ship out a new version of the Roblox game client. We were told to code things in a way where it's off by default, and then we have to turn on this flag in the back end, and that would make this feature go live. And I remember we turned on this community Sift feature, and I think I made like a couple of mistakes when programming it, and crashes started going up. And also people started being really angry over the hashtags. So like you turn on the flag and then we had these real-time stats where you could watch like the crash rates, how many people are joining and all that kind of stuff. And crash rates went up. So whenever that happens, you got to turn off that feature.
Okay, interesting. That's an interesting way of programming it, because sometimes even just in my games on Roblox, I'll try and program things like that where just sort of one variable can switch off that whole new feature. And it's very useful, as you say, if you ever need to roll something back, instead of just losing all the work that you've done, you can just switch it off for the moment, figure out what's wrong with it, switch it on again later, that sort of thing.
Definitely. So that is actually, if you follow like industry best practices, that's probably not the best way to do it. So the best way you should be thinking about doing it, and we did this for some features, like anything that we were really not sure of, we would do this thing called percentage rollout. So imagine, in some ways it's kind of similar. We are like, we ship the feature in update. It's turned off by default, and then you turn on this flag that a certain percentage of players will have this feature. And you start out with like 1% of people have this feature on, and then you ramp up to like 5 when you see that crashes aren't going up, and then you go up to 10, 50, 100, so on, that kind of thing.
Okay, that's cool. So just in general, like what was it like working at Roblox? How did it compare to sort of your previous job on mobile games? And how did it compare to sort of your expectations of what the industry would actually be like?
So, one of the things I enjoyed the most was that I did have a lot of freedom when I was there. So after this community sift thing, which, community sift was just something I was assigned on. After that community sift thing, I was getting a lot of freedom just to figure out, like, what is Roblox as a game engine really missing? And, what kind of features would be the highest bang for the buck? So one of the next things I did was I think I was just messing around trying to make something. And I learned about like sounds. And back then, sounds, they didn't actually work on the server. They weren't simulated at all if you created it on the server side, and I think they're missing a bunch of features. And also I noticed that there were all these features that were really easy to add to sounds that would be cool. I think we called them like sound effects, like you can add a modifier onto a sound. And I realized they'd be really easy to add, but, and they weren't currently in. So basically I made a pitch. I had to make like the slide deck. I had to present it in front of the department head, and I remember at some point I had to present it to Dave Bazuki, and we had to go through a couple of revisions of what we were wanting to do and all that kind of stuff. But it was a lot of that kind of thing. It was a lot of I have this plan of this thing that I really want to do, and now if it affects a lot of people, you got to convince people that you want to do it this way, and if it didn't affect a lot of people, we could just ship this change. So, okay, just another shout out. I forget if this is my idea or not, but we changed the, this is super random. We changed, when you set the volume in the Roblox client, it used to use this unique sound that you didn't hear anywhere else. And like, it would always keep that sound in memory. And at some point, we changed that to the oof sound. And this is, when the oof meme was like, I think it was on the way up. So we're like, this is a twofold thing. We could reduce the amount of audio memory usage, and we can also boost this oof meme. So we did that. It was a very random change. That took all of 5 minutes. One of the other things that we did, I was actually less involved in coding this. Have you ever worked with the developer modifiable chat before?
Where you can change what the chat looks like or the size of it.
Yeah, if you see in-game, like when you launch Roblox, like there's this chat folder or a chat service, and then there's like all this code.
All the module scripts and stuff.
Yeah, so I was the one driving the fact that we should make it modifiable. I think before we did that, if you wanted to change the chat at all, you basically had to write it from scratch. And we had an intern working on it. Well, we actually had 2 interns. We had Exitsu, shout out to him, and Gamer 101 working on it. It was mainly them writing the systems and all that kind of stuff. And I bring that up because actually in Robeats, at the time of speaking, I'm in the middle of replacing a lot of that code with more performant code that can do other stuff. So I know the chat, it ended up being a little on the complicated side, so I don't blame you for it not having really dug too deep into it. It is very complicated. I guess that's one of my regrets. But so that was one of the things that we did. And just another random thing. This one you probably do use. If you ever set a brick color 3 before, as opposed to that enum color, that was also just another thing that we knocked out. That one took a while, though. That one involved all these networking changes and all that kind of stuff.
That's really cool, though, that you can sort of come up with these ideas, convince people and put it in, because I've definitely used the sound effects, and I've definitely used the setting color, which is really useful when you're trying to color match something to a texture, for example. Super, super useful. So it's really interesting that you could just sort of come up with those ideas and put them in, and now everyone's just using them every day in their creations.
Yeah, so in a lot of ways, it was really exciting to be able to, and it was really motivational to be able to, you write this code and you ship it out, and you'll see a bunch of happy people. And this is also when I started getting into Twitter and all this kind of stuff. I had a Twitter account forever, but I never used it. But like, I'd ship this feature, like that Brick Color 3, and I just see people tweeting about it. I'm like, wow, this is awesome. But then it also goes the other way around. I remember there's a bunch of we did this one thing. This is internal, so you probably wouldn't even notice this, but we made the audio system multi-threaded, or we turned on like multi-threaded mode for this audio system. So like you'd have less lag when loading big sounds, but then that caused all sorts of crashes, and it was really subtle. And like, we had to go through months of that. Like, oh, fix this code, ship the product, turn it on, see a bunch of crashes, maybe a few people complain. We got to turn it off, write the code, ship it again. And it was like a 2-week iteration cycle between like writing the code and seeing it, like whether it actually worked or not. Because like these crashes are so rare, we couldn't actually reproduce them on our computer, but we could see them on the graph when we actually turned it on. So it was good and bad in some ways. Bad in the way that you're like playing with fire.
Cool, that's really interesting to hear about. And while we're sort of on the topic of working at Roblox, if someone wanted to get into Roblox, I know that there's the accelerator and incubator sort of internships. So what sort of do you know about those? What's the purpose of them?
So I was around the first round of accelerators. I know they had interns for a very long time, and a couple of the full-time employees there, like Stickmaster Luke and Merely/Serenok, I think they're twins, and a few other people. They started as interns and became full-time employees. But when I was there, they were really ramping up this internship program, and they had regular interns, which was they would actually come on the client team or the web team and do like real work. And they had this thing called the accelerators, which was, and I was there the very first summer they did it. They brought people over. I think they paid them a full intern salary, which is pretty good. And they had you make a game. And, I think like they did have somebody who was in charge of managing, like, make sure that you weren't completely slacking off. But, that always seemed really fun to me. Like, I would like to be like full expenses paid 3-month vacation to go make whatever game I wanted. So if you want to get an internship at Roblox, I know you definitely, I know they're all Dev Forum members, and I know they do occasionally send out like posts saying, taking applications. So I think everybody that, they got in through that application right there. And I know some of the people they brought in weren't making new games. Some of the people were just like they were brought in to improve their existing game. So I know like one of the most money-making games, I think something in Robloxia, like it's the game where you have like houses and stuff. So they brought him in, and his whole summer was just like he worked with some product managers to improve the monetization on his game. So they taught him, oh, if you make a starter pack and you make all this time limited stuff, you're going to make boatloads more money. And that's what he did. And, now he is probably a multimillionaire. So, you can get a lot out of it. And you can get, there's a lot of different experiences to be had.
Okay, interesting. So do you think those sorts of skills and experience then put you in a better starting position if you wanted to go into the video games industry, sort of doing what you do at a AAA studio? Or do you think they're only really useful if you plan to stick with Roblox and just stay on this platform?
Okay. Well, I'll talk about other people first before talking about myself. So shout out to Abstract Alex, where after they did this accelerator program, I think they had this Robloxian high school game that was making enough money where they were just like, okay, great, we got started. Let's actually start a real company and have a real office, hire employees who are also the other accelerators. And they were like, we can just start our own company. We're making enough money where, we can like be 100% legit. So that is one path in. And if that works out for you, I think that is probably best. Like working for yourself is really awesome. Not having a specific person be your boss. That's super awesome. Now, at least for me, so I guess in the end, I was happy I did get that C++ experience on my resume.
Yeah.
So one of the things I think is kind of interesting is actually at my current job, I am doing stuff that's actually pretty similar to what I was doing at Roblox. So I am working on their game engine. I'm actually working on their editor. I'm working on really similar tools. I remember like I did a lot of stuff in Roblox Studio. I'm doing a lot of the equivalent for the in-house game engine at the place that I'm working at. I think the big difference here is that as much as we like to complain that Roblox Studio sucks, it's got to be at least somewhat decent because, like millions of people use it every day. So like, all the really crappy stuff has been fixed. For this in-house game engine, some of this code's been around since like the year 2000. So there's some real archaeology.
So we'll move on then to sort of Robeats and what you're doing on the Roblox platform as sort of a hobby. Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about Robeats and what the game does.
Yeah, so I actually got the original idea when I was working on all those sound improvements. I played this game. It's called Virtual Piano on Roblox, and I remember that was really cool. Like, basically, it would map your entire keyboard to a piano, and you could play a song, and then it would be completely networked to other people. Like, you would just find all the sheet music that would look like, QWE, RT. It would just be all these random keyboard letters. And if you could remember these keyboard letters, you could play music and other people could hear it. I remember when I played Roblox, I was just thinking, this is the most awesome thing ever. And what I wanted to do with a lot of the sound changes was make it really easy to do this kind of thing. And for the longest time, I had this idea of like, I wanted to make this multiplayer, real-time rock band. So that was where the original idea came from. And I also had some experience doing rhythm games. I had made this one previously for a game jam called Moe Moe Rush. It's kind of a weird name. But this game, imagine, you are this giant schoolgirl. You're running through Japan, and like the Japanese military is trying to stop you. And they're like throwing all these helicopters and stuff at you, and you got to punch them. But then it's all like in time with the music. So that was it's a pretty weird game. We're into weird stuff. You can do this kind of thing when you do a game jam. So yeah, I had a little bit of experience making rhythm games. So specifically, I started Robeats for a Roblox Hack Week. They have this thing called Hack Week, which they do, I don't know, maybe like once every 2 years, where you just have 1 week off to like work on whatever you want. And that's where I got the real core of Robeats down. Remember, my original idea was multiplayer real-time rock band. And I think that was a really great experience. Like, after 1 week, I had something that I thought was actually pretty fun. And I think if you go look up on YouTube, I still have the original video of the Hack Week demo where I had Stickmaster Luke and the 2 Gamer 101s playing this game. And, I think that's really important for just indie game development in general. I would recommend doing game jams because it does force you to get something out in a very short amount of time. And you'll just find out very quickly whether it's fun or not, just from like, you'll have your finished product and you can give it out to people to actually play.
Yeah, well, a lot of good advice is to focus on sort of the core loop of the game first, because although you want to hit all of these different things, when we were talking earlier about Zynga and they want to hit this feature and that feature and whatever, and sort of it can become quite sort of scientific and methodical. Sort of at the end of the day, it's still got to be fun. People still want to play it and get something out of it. So I think if you focus on the core game loop first, which is what I try and do with sort of when I'm designing a game, that definitely makes sure that it's at least fun to start with. And then you can layer on, the monetization and all the other features as well. But as long as the core concept is fun to play, then you're onto a winner. So I think that's pretty interesting that Hack Week and game jams can force you to focus on that.
Yeah, I think you get some of your best ideas. Well, you get some winners, some losers. Sometimes Hack Week you get Moe Moe Rush, super weird game that is definitely it's just weird. But sometimes you get winners too.
Yeah. Okay, so that's pretty interesting. So Robeats, how many visits has it got now? Is it sort of 26 million or something? I think when I looked, so it's clearly working.
Yeah. So it's been good. It's been going for a while. Let's see. Oh, we're pretty close to 30 million visits. I might do this little something special for that.
So what sort of things then keep bringing people back? Because I assume people must keep playing for it to get to nearly 30 million now. What is it that keeps drawing them back to the game?
Yeah, definitely. So, one of the key things after I did this like 1 week demo, I was that like had a little bit of reflection time just to think like what kind of game do we want this to make? Because like after 1 week, all we had was just the fact that you could play a rhythm game with multiple people and compete to see your scores. So what we ended up doing was we were thinking, have you ever heard of this Nintendo game called Splatoon before?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
we tried to make the core like loop of the game kind of similar in the fact that you have this lobby that's the city and you go and play matches and then you come back to the lobby. Specifically, I also wanted to integrate a lot of the learnings I had from Zynga and all these various other startups in terms of like how to make a free-to-play game. So I would summarize that as this. When you have a free-to-play game, I guess it's a little cynical, but bear with me here. Your goal is how do I get people to go convert from a free user to a paid user? So how do I get people to pay? And the mentality that we learned was that the way to do this is you want to make the game seem valuable in their eyes. And the way that you make the game seem valuable is you have them play multiple days, hopefully in a row, but like, keep playing as opposed to like pay once and like never play again. So you want to have them coming back to the game like every single day, hopefully multiple times a week, that kind of thing. So the systems in Robeats from the get-go were all about how do we incentivize people to play the game and then come back tomorrow, the day after, that kind of thing. So that's where a lot of the current systems you'll see. We have like this daily song shop. It has like new songs every day. I think that was one of the very first things that we did to try to implement this. We're also doing a lot of these other, I guess what you would call industry best practices, such as daily missions. I think that's a pretty obvious one, like new missions every day. We're also doing this thing called a gacha system where you have this like basically a slot machine. You roll it and then you have to like collect all these things that come out of the slot machine. And we got a few other things like character progression through gear and a lot of stuff for you to slowly grind to work up for. So so you're not like you have not seen all the content after just like one play session. That's the goal.
Okay, cool. And you continue Robeats even now when you don't work at Roblox, don't you, as sort of a side hobby?
Yep. So for a while in between jobs, before I started my current company, I was thinking about I was working on Robeats like full time every single day. So that was for maybe a period of like 2 or 3 months. And that's when I really like banged out a lot of these features. But then, I don't know if you ever felt this, but working at home all day, you get a little stir crazy. So, wanted to get out a little bit more. So now it's just like a part-time thing.
Okay, and so you then went on to work at this AAA studio. So
Yeah.
in terms of going for that job, was that pretty much your C programming experience from Roblox that helped you to get that?
Yeah, I ended up having a connection from a previous job recommend me to this current company. And, it's the same kind of interview. They start with that packet of C++ questions. They ask you all the C++ trivia. I'm like, I definitely got this one in the bag. And just went from there. And I ended up having to move across the country. But, I thought it was fun. In the end, it was a fun experience.
So if someone was wanting to go on to work for a AAA studio, and for example their course at college didn't really give them the opportunity to do C programming, would you recommend that someone went out of their way to specifically learn it, at least to sort of get familiar with it, so that they can start getting some experience?
Yeah, okay. So I would say at the very least you definitely should be branching out. Like it'll only help your own personal growth to branch out. Like, like I was doing like C, and then I also had some experience doing web stuff. That's how we did all this like Ruby on Rails backend for Robeats. But I definitely do think it is very valuable to just branch out and just go learn. Like there's all these niche areas of computer science, like I don't know, like compiler design or something like that. I think those are all very valuable if you like learning to learn about. At least specifically for this getting a job question. Well, I would put it like this. I like out of college, I remember it was very difficult to even get past the first stage of interviews to these large game companies. So like realistically, the kind of places that are hiring new grads, they're, I don't think you should just limit yourself to, oh, I have to work at Blizzard or I have to work at, I don't know, Riot Games or something. Those big companies, those big name brand companies, they get a ton of like new grad. Like basically every guy in college who plays video games at some point has thought, I want to work in video games. So like they get probably like thousands of resumes. So right out of college, it's somewhat difficult to kind of differentiate yourself. But the way, like just like anything else in life, the way you would get it is you slowly work towards it. So like realistically, most of the job openings in the video game industry are at like smaller companies. The thing that makes a lot of money right now is free to play games like mobile games. So I think a really like realistic place to start is go learn how to do mobile. And I learned a lot of my C through doing iOS stuff. I worked on this iOS game for like 2 years and it bombed, and I was very sad, but I did get a lot of C experience from doing that, so it wasn't a complete waste.
That's interesting because so personally I'm not actually pursuing a career in video game development. Sort of for me, I've kept it as a hobby on the side, and I'm actually doing an engineering degree instead. So I was sort of interested to know, when it's a hobby on the side, it's quite interesting. You do it in your free time. It stays fun most of the time. What's it like actually working in an office every day and working for one of these studios, turning your hobby into sort of your professional career? Does that change it for you? Do you feel a bit differently about it?
Yeah. Well, I would say for those people out there, if you enjoy programming, the quickest way to suck the enjoyment out of something is to be forced to do it every single day. So, if you somewhat enjoy programming and you're thinking about getting into it, as a professional job, let's hope that you really, really enjoy programming. I'm just joking a little bit right here. But one of the things I will say is that I'd say like, for me personally, there's like two kinds of programming. There's like me staying at home working on my hobbies programming, which is great. I love this program. I live for this kind of programming. I can't wait. Or, I got other stuff going on nowadays, but like in the past, I couldn't wait just to get home and just bang out some Robeats code. And like, I didn't have to answer to anybody. I just did whatever features I wanted. That's great. Professional coding, it effectively is you are going to be told what to do. And you got to follow all these systems. They got this thing called code review where when you finish your code, you got to go send it to other coders and they'll comment on it. And there's, usually some people who are like very picky. They're like, oh, you didn't do the indentation right. You should change this variable name, all this kind of stuff. It might sound a little bit like I'm complaining right now. I think another better way to summarize this is just being professional. So like being professional in a coding setting is being able to work with other people. And I am complaining about like, oh, I'm being told what to do. I got to write this code in a certain way. But when you're coding for a job, it is ultimately about how well you work with other people. And that is, it is very different in the end from working with yourself.
Yeah, I imagine, to be fair, it's probably quite similar with a lot of hobbies. As long as it doesn't ruin the hobby programming for you, as long as you can still go home and enjoy that side of it too. And things like Hack Week actually sounds like a really cool idea at Roblox, where they give you a little bit of time to just explore what you want to do in your own time with no one, as you say, reviewing your code.
So this is why I think, remember how we were talking about before, like there were several Roblox accelerators that are able to start their own company? I think that the best kind of programming you can do is the programming that you do for yourself that's helping to support yourself. Because Obviously, it's got some downsides in that, like, you always have to be worried about your income flow. But I think that is what everybody should be striving for. I know, like, not all people are cut out for the entrepreneurial life, but I'm guessing if you're listening to a Roblox podcast, you at least have some interest in making video games, making businesses, and all that kind of stuff. And I would say that's great. That's what you should really be aiming for, because when you're working for a professional company, what you're ultimately doing is you're trading your time for money. And like, you only got a limited amount of time in this life, right? Like, we don't like to think about it that much, but like, you have some finite number of time. When you have your own business, and, if you're listening to this, I don't know where your Roblox game is. Hopefully it's on the way up, or hopefully you're slowly working on it. The goal is you've done it, you've done the work, and then you can put it out there, and you don't have to constantly be thinking about it, and it'll slowly get you passive income. And now that you don't have to actively do this exchange of time for money, you can start thinking about, how do I make this better? And like, that's ultimately how you get ahead. That's how you get successful in life right there. Almost think of it like an investment. When you're making this Roblox game, if you're thinking about how to monetize it, how to make it popular, it is an investment. Like, it is an investment in yourself. You're making an investment that will hopefully generate for you long-term revenue and fame, and I don't know what else you can get from Roblox games. You get like Twitter popularity or something like that.
And I suppose I've kind of just got one last question about AAA studios and
sure.
a career in video games, which is, did your colleagues take sort of a similar pathway to you, sort of, going to mobile games, hopping around a bit, getting some C experience, and then going into a AAA studio?
So I would say a lot of my colleagues here, okay, so at my specific company, a lot of these colleagues are like, they're pretty old. Like, they've been around in the game industry for a very long time. So the only commonality, I would say, among all of them is they all had some sort of C experience, some sort of professional C experience. So I know a lot of them, they used to actually be like mechanical engineers or like aerospace engineers. They used to write like, I don't know, the things that power airplanes or something like that. And then somehow they got into the game industry. So a lot of the programmers who've been there a long time, they worked in other fields where they worked with like embedded software and that kind of stuff. The other, I guess the common thing I do see is a lot of them are from game schools. I know there are several out there like Full Sail and DigiPen. A lot of the designers and artists come from programs like that. So, but the one disclaimer I will say on that is, if you go to a school like that, it's 100% not guaranteed that you're going to get your dream job. So just like anything else in life, you have to really work at it. And, you're going to still be competing with a bunch of other people. But if you've 100% decided that games like are your life's passion and that's what you want to do, definitely think about some sort of game school. Like, I know there's one in Texas. I know it's called Guildhall. I think it's SMU Guildhall. I know a bunch of people from there, from DigiPen, which is up in Seattle, and that kind of thing. I definitely say you should follow your passion, because, that's, in some ways that's what I'm doing with life, right? But you do want to be realistic about what are your opportunities. What are your opportunities, like, if not everything goes according to plan, like, what's your plan B, what's your plan C, all that kind of stuff, right? But then, I will say, on a positive note, if you really want to differentiate yourself from the hordes of League of Legends players who are also applying for Riot Games, one of the key differentiators that you can be is, you want to show your persistence, your drive. If you think games are your life's passion, you should show it in like how you spend your time. You should spend all that time like banging your head against a wall, learning how to code, doing art, learning Roblox, doing all sorts of stuff, right? So yeah, I think that's the advice that I'd give.
Well, that's all we've got time for this episode, so if you enjoyed it, please subscribe or follow the podcast to make sure you don't miss any of our future installments. And thank you to our special guest Spotco for joining me today and putting aside the time to share your perspective on the industry to both inform and inspire future developers. Beyond the Blox is brought to you by BanTech Systems, a development studio creating interactive games, systems, and solutions on Roblox. Find BanTech's profile on Roblox and click through to the BanTech Systems group for more information. Don't forget you can listen to any episode of Beyond the Blox on Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and many other popular listening platforms. You'll also find it on the BanTech Systems YouTube channel. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode of Beyond the Blox.